When it comes to this episode, there's a lot of stuff that it had to do. It had to introduce the Daleks to a new audience and also make the older audience believe that these new Daleks were something that they could love as much as they loved the old ones. For me personally, this was my first introduction to the Daleks. This episode didn't just have to do all that, but it also had to set up a few things that would then appear in the last episode, like, well, the Daleks. That's your introduction. For everyone who's watching this video, the time that this episode is set is supposed to be the future. However, because it is set in 2012, it means that it's actually the past. It's a bit weird, that. The episode takes place inside of some kind of private museum, so it's time for some references. So the Cybermen mask is shown, as well as a Slovene hand, which are basically the two that I noticed. They spent a long time hovering over this Cyberman head. I think they did this because, well, to all of the previous fans of Doctor Who, they'd be sitting there like, oh my goodness, it's the Cybermen on television again, and the Doctor knows what this is. Welcome back to Doctor Who. He's trying to get them over onto their side again. For new fans, this is going right over their heads, As a child, you're sitting there going, I don't know where they're talking about the metal helmet. But for everyone who is, like, now over 55, they are sitting there understanding the reference, and they get the homage to the villain. And then there's this weird moment, which was kind of surreal for me, because a bunch of soldiers walk in with guns, and you're going to have to excuse the bad animation, but for me, this was one of the first things that I did as an animation. One of my first animations, which you'll have to excuse for being terrible, was this Doctor Who episode. I've forgotten the title, but it involved a bunch of soldiers coming out in the same sort of way to confront the Doctor. It's weird how Doctor Who has kind of planted itself in my subconscious. So even, without thinking that, oh yeah, I'm going to nick this, I'm not nicking it. It appears for me. I understand that it's there. What am I talking about? People are going to think I'm insane. I noticed that this episode is written not by Russell T Davies, is what I was expecting, but it was actually written by a man called Robert Shearman. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I did Google his name because I recognised the name and I couldn't remember where I remembered it from. It's because he's written multiple big Finnish dramas. One in particular was called Jubilee, and I don't know, I really can't pronounce these things. And it featured the Eighth Doctor, and it's loosely based off this episode. So we're given snappy introductions to all of the characters. Basically, they're all American, apart from one British bloke. Van Staten is front and centre in this scene. It's basically making him out to be the centre of importance, the most important person in the room. They tried to make him out that way. And doing that, it proves that he is just annoying and in the middle, and basically the boss, because he's in the centre. There's a joke, and then he expects everyone to laugh at it, and obviously they don't, because it wasn't very funny, but they're expected to because he pays them, which I think is a nice little idea. He's very one-dimensional, but at least he has some kind of purpose in the episode. In Series 11, we have a, what's he called? Not Donald Trump, we have a Donald Trump impersonator, and he kind of fills the role that Van Staten does in this episode. And I think he does it much, much worse. I don't think it's anything to do with the acting, it's the writing, and that's what I'm commenting on. This Donald Trump-like character basically just walks around and gets told off, and basically just really irritating throughout the entire episode. I always get the impression with that episode that Chibnall was sitting there like trying to hold out a sign that said, "Look how clever I am. I've poked fun at Donald Trump in an episode of Doctor Who." Also, he's got this weird obsession with guns and violence. They could shoot me when I'm watching that episode. Chibnall. Anyway, the American in this episode is childish. He's extremely childish. He gets bored and then he throws something away. Literally he does that. They literally demonstrate that on screen to try and give you the impression that he is just bad. The one in Arachnids in the UK doesn't have a moment when you think, oh, he's actually just really rude. He's rude, but he's rude to people. He never does it with his actions. And he just comes across as very don't take me seriously, but at least the guy in Dalek is taken slightly seriously because he actually moves around and is actually more of a character than the guy in Arachnids in the UK. I've been distracted, let's move on. When we see this moment, we have Eccleston beautifully conveying the emotion of just being basically spat on, and he portrays it so well because he's such a good actor. At this point, Van Staten should just be holding a sign that says, "Hate me, please." In an episode called Dalek, it's actually time to show off the Dalek. You get the eye stalk, and then the lights come on in a sequence. It's a really clever visual trick or visual technique that makes you see the Dalek as being important. This is a beautiful moment, actually. Well, it's not beautiful. It's sad and it's traumatic and it's horrible to see the Doctor with so much anger flowing through his veins. And it's horrible to see the Doctor with so much anger and sadness flowing through his veins. But it is a beautiful sequence, and everything that they come up with in terms of the dialogue is really good. Like, all of the lines of dialogue make sense. They're not just saying things because they sound profound or because the Doctor's angry, but then his argument doesn't make sense. His argument actually makes sense. The Dalek, he actually tries to kill the Dalek at one point, and the Dalek asks for mercy, and the Doctor says that you wouldn't give it to anyone else. The characters in the episode are a bit like the audience characters when they have this misunderstanding of why the Doctor's doing this, especially if you're watching this for the first time without the rest of the season and having a big series of series to understand what is happening. Through Mickey, as soon as Rose sees anyone literally that she's met for about 2 minutes, Mickey's literally going through the window. They see the Dalek being tortured. I'm not actually quite sure what he's doing. It's to be giving him some kind of shoulder barge. Breaks out of its change once Rose touches it, and that means the thing's on the loose. But if you look at the sequence when it breaks out of its chains, it'd have been really easy to film the Dalek literally just breaking out of its chains and moving on. But what it did was, instead of doing that, they had this sort of slowness, tenseness to it by making the chains pop individually. The reason for this might not be because it looks quite intense. It might be because the budget for Doctor Who is not that big, and if you film something in one long shot, like if you film John Wick, it's actually harder to film John Wick with such poise and so much precise movement. I don't think poise was the right word, and everything has to be perfect, and it would take a good week or two for the effects team to, get a Dalek and then blow the things out, so then the chains fall off, and etc, etc. It might have been cheaper just to, break the chains in a few little shots. Is it possible for CGI in Doctor Who to look worse over time? Because that shot with the Dalek in resolution flying in looks terrible compared to the shots that we see in a 2005 episode of Doctor Who. This thing is over 10 years old, and it looks as good as the 2019 New Year's Day special. In resolution, everything looks quite staged. It's set during the day, and, to build atmosphere, you might want to set something at night or in the rain, like Dalek does. Everything seems quite staged, I think, because of that. The fact that we see so much sort of dead bodies, pain, people being killed, and then their corpses laying on the floor, we don't get that in resolution. We have an explosion that generates from nowhere, people being shot but they're running away at this point, so they just fall to the ground. We're not getting any close shots of people's hands or people's torsos in pain. They just seem to be taking the shot and falling. Also, the Dalek in this episode had a direct reference to an episode of Doctor Who called Remembrance of the Daleks, when a Dalek flies up a staircase. I didn't know. I thought that was the first time we saw that, but it turns out it wasn't. It rises above. It does not need to have so much power. It just needs to be smart. The Dalek in Dalek is smart. The Dalek in Resolution is using brute force. There's also a lovely little metaphor in Dalek when the Dalek is literally rising above all of the people. It's kind of a metaphor for the Daleks being supreme and literally rising above everyone else. I don't think it was intended like that, but that's something that if you read into it too much, you get. And the Doctor tells the Dalek to kill itself. This is a really important moment, because if the Doctor didn't do this, if he spoke to the Daleks like he speaks to every single other creature, which is what he seems to do, and she seems to do in episodes in recent history, because he's telling this thing to kill itself, it's made it darker, it's made it more atmospheric, it's made it creepier, it's proved to the audience that the Doctor means business when it comes to the Daleks. Now, a Dalek can't be good. I think that that's one of the things that you really have to take away from a Dalek episode, is you can't have a good Dalek, because otherwise you ruin the danger that comes from the other Daleks. Hey, into the Dalek, that's what you did. But when it comes to Doctor Who, you have to make it kid-friendly, but you have to prove violence, you have to prove anger, and having the Doctor go to kill the Dalek, but then having the Dalek literally kill itself because it'd rather be bad than good. It'd rather be supreme and with so much violence, and it believes that it's wrong. The Dalek believes that it is not correct and not pure, so therefore it kills itself. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a kid's show. Van Staten gets what he deserves in the end of the episode. He gets his comeuppance. His words are literally used against him to make him get thrown on the street. And to complete the comparison between him and not Donald Trump, Donald Trump character gets nothing. I really don't have any way to transition into this next bit, but for some reason Adam literally just stumbles in on the TARDIS. He's sitting there and the Doctor tells him to go home somehow, and he just goes, "Well, I better just walk into this box then." It doesn't sit very well, but he's in the next episode. But when we get to reviewing that next week, then we will talk about that, whether he's actually worth being there at all. So I hope you enjoy these videos, because you're gonna get one, because I want to complete them by the end of the year. I'm only on episode 6. But anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. Hopefully you did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure you give it a like, subscribe if you are new. We're at 120 subscribers at the time of recording. I really hope that we can keep building on it. I only wanted to get 100 this year, so 20 plus is amazing. But thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you soon. Goodbye.